Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Lunatics Radio Hour podcast. I'm Abby Brenker, sitting here with Alan Kudan.
Hello.
And today we have exorcism stories to discuss with you.
So, to be clear, this is not Exorcism, the film, fan fiction.
Correct. It's a broad net. Any exorcism story will do. And we have some very different takes on exorcism to talk through today.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
We have a very modern version. We have a Middle Eastern folklore tale. And then we have something that is hard to define, and we will get to it when we get to it.
Interesting. I'm intrigued.
Good. I like it when you're intrigued. So I don't want to give too much away.
You've given very little.
But I'm very excited about the first story. It is a very, very good, very well-written, scary story, which I live for. So I think I want to start there because it feels like it handles exorcisms in a very classic horror way, but with a few twists.
Is there any preface you want to go, or is this, you just wanted to jump in?
Let's just jump in. Let's let the story speak for itself.
It literally will speak for itself as soon as we hit play.
Well, somebody else will speak it to us, but yes.
Well, yeah.
Because the story isn't reading itself.
It's recorded.
It's recorded, yeah. All right, let's hit play.
Exorcist, written by Brittany Johnson, read by Adam McAloney.
Sadie Jones sat at the foot of her bed, placed the laptop upon its stand, and accepted the video chat request. It was 8:01 p.m., Saturday, May 14th, 2022. "Hello, Miss Jones. Are you ready to begin?" the bespectacled man on the screen asked. "Yes, Dr. Copeland." "Do you accept the terms and conditions of this remote exorcism?" "Yes, I do." "Good. Allow Patricia to restrain you." Sadie gulped and nodded at Patricia in the corner. Patricia nodded back. Sadie positioned herself in the middle of the bed, propped her head against the lump of pillows behind her, and spread her thin arms and legs out wide. Patricia fastened the cuffs securely around Sadie's wrists and ankles. "Now, Patricia, you are not to intervene under any circumstances. The demon that resides within Miss Jones is a powerful one. Do you accept these demands?" Dr. Copeland asked. "Yes." Patricia's voice was slack, monotone. She returned herself to the corner, folding her arms across the waist of her pale pink sweater. Dr. Copeland shifted his gaze to Sadie. "Miss Jones, have you taken the correct dosage of the psychoactive drug I prescribed you?" "Yes, Dr. Copeland." "Good. Then we shall proceed." Sadie took a deep breath in and expelled in one shuddering blow. Sweat dewed her youthful, hollow chest. She could feel her brain unwind, sagging as the drugs worked through her. It would allow her to open up in ways that would otherwise be extremely difficult, Dr. Copeland had assured her. That way, they could expose the evil head on. "Demon, come forth to me. Show yourself once and for all, and let us be done with it." A great force wrung Sadie's bowels as if a knife had been stuck there and was slowly twisting back and forth. She trembled, eyes glossy, head pounding. Vomit climbed from her esophagus, but all that poured from her lips was bile. Yes, come to me, demon. Reveal yourself in the presence of the Lord in his light. You cannot escape it. Let me see thy face. Let me know thy name. Pain seared through Sadie, her mind heavy, same as her eyes. Reality began to split like twine. A swirling, phantasmic vision came to her. Dark apparitions scrambling all over the ceiling with their gnashing maws and soulless, milky eyes. "No," she cried, her voice so detached from her own body that she could not feel the sensation of her screams. "They're coming for me, Dr. Copeland. They're Her speech sputtered and the pain ripped through her again, contorting every muscle behind her sickly, goose-pimpled flesh. "Demon, I command you, under God, to release this woman from your grip. Free her from the shackles of your bondage. Be gone from her. Be gone!" Sadie burst into desperate, ear-shattering wails. She was fighting harder than Dr. Copeland had expected. This woman was not as weak-willed as he first perceived. "Patricia!" Dr. Copeland said impatiently, sounding so distant to Sadie. Patricia moved at once to the laptop, blocking the doctor from view. Sadie's head wobbled, tears spilling down her cheeks as she tried to divine the meaning of the hushed whispers passing between the doctor and her caretaker. I need to give her more of the psychoactive. She's not opening up the way I require. Patricia said no more, only getting to work at once, grabbing the tincture from the tray at the bedside table, swirling it a few times with a stir stick, and then bringing it over to Sadie, whose eyes opened wide at the sight of her. No more of that. It's hurting me. I can't think. I can't see straight. I'm hallucinating. Don't listen to her, Patricia, Dr. Copeland growled. That's the demon speaking, not Miss Jones. Give her the medicine. Patricia poured the tincture into the girl's mouth. Sadie choked and spat as much of it as she could up. More, Dr. Copeland yelled, blaring through the laptop speakers. All of it? Patricia questioned. Yes, all of it, and quickly. Patricia grabbed Sadie's jaw and forced the bitter liquid down her throat. Slipping into a vast, dark realm of delusions, her thoughts moving through molasses, Sadie's eyes rolled into her skull. Speech was unavailable. Through blurred eyes, she peered at the laptop screen where Dr. Copeland was now changing. She could not hear exactly the words coming from him. Her ears felt swollen like she'd put shells from the beach over them. But she knew in her heart they were not of the Bible. No, not of any holy script known to man. They did not belong to the Lord above, to the Lord below. Foul speech oozed from his slowly darkening, cracked lips. Hideous sounds engulfed Sadie Jones, worming into her ears like parasites. There you are. Come to me, my child. Do not be afraid of the darkness. The black smudging on his lips now spread in splotches across his ragged cheeks, up to his forehead, down his neck, coating his entire body in shiny, iridescent darkness, a new layer of thick, brutal skin. Protruding from his forehead was a set of identical bumps that expanded with each word he incant, until finally, two horns, black as night, burst forth, climbing upwards in a twisted fashion. His tongue split down the middle, and his glasses fell off, and his eyes, oh God, his eyes, swelled with a crimson fluid that could only have belonged to the depths of hell. Sadie tried to scream, but it struggled in her throat. The sedation had taken hold, and every action slowed to a point of uselessness. God, please help me, she thought. This is wrong. This is all wrong. Oh no, my dear. God cannot help you now. Dr. Copeland replied as his forked tongue slipped out like a snake. Sadie's breath caught as she gazed into his bloody pools. And then, Dr. Copeland did something that could not be explained. He began to crawl from the laptop. It started with his right hand, which had become a sleek, long claw, easing through the screen and into Sadie's room. It grabbed around her calf, and Sadie tried to jolt backwards, now barely able to control her bodily functions. Next came Copeland's left clawed hand, attaching itself firmly to her opposite calf. From there, he pulled himself forward into Sadie's room, departing from his world entirely. He was atop her now. Sadie wrenched her eyes shut. Keep your eyes open, my dear. Sadie refused. Open them! The demon bellowed. Sadie could not resist the command. You stupid, helpless fawn. You thought you were possessed? No. No, my dear. Just a sad little girl with sad little thoughts. So gullible these young ones are now. Aren't they, Patricia? Copeland spun his head around to wink at his aide, who remained in the corner resigned. He spun back, grinning wide with indomitable triumph as he caressed Sadie's cheek with one long claw. You have no idea what it feels like to be truly one with something like me. But you will. Dr. Copeland reached his black claws into Sadie's mouth and began wrenching it past human bounds, forcing himself in, horns first, like a sausage fitting through tubing. Slowly he crawled through the girl, scaly black skin slouching off his spindly body, tunneling further and further into her, until his last two elongated, malformed hooves disappeared. Now he was everywhere, felt everything, knew everything, and the last bit of Sadie Jones receded away, 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 where even God could not touch. Sadie's jaw snapped shut, her eyes going cold as a snake. He had her now, and this was just the beginning. Patricia smiled at the girl and walked to the foot of the bed. Good to have you back in our world, Doctor. She shut the laptop closed.
It's so good, isn't it?
This was something else.
Written really well.
Horror. So horror is a very visual format, right? It's really where it thrives.
Sure.
Even the books that are supposed to be the scariest books of all time, they usually they fall flat. When you're writing a horror story and you're doing it in a short format, you really just got to cut to the chase. And it all comes down to just like your word choice to really get the imagery. The idea of this entity going in through her mouth and its skin sluicing off as it goes, that got me. That got me good.
Yeah.
It's a great story. Also, Dr. Copeland. I think I know a Dr. Copeland, and that's why.
Struck a nerve, eh?
I guess so. 'Cause he was the bad guy.
He was the bad guy. It was a plot twist.
What a plot twist.
Never trust an exorcist.
We should get that on a t-shirt.
Especially an online exorcist.
Yeah, I mean, a Craigslist exorcist is just a bad call. Great call, however, of using Adam for this one.
Yeah.
So I've been going through a lot of horror audiobooks recently. It's that time of year.
It's a Christmas spirit.
Yeah. Well, it's a holdover from Halloween, and books take a long time to read. And I queued up a bunch, and I'm just really enjoying them. But even the most amazing voice actors often struggle when you're trying to do like strong emotions, like, yelling or panic or whatnot, because there's the limitation of recording a microphone.
Yeah.
You can't just scream in a booth. You have to convey powerful emotions without a lot of volume. And that's something that's actually pretty hard to do. And Adam did a killer job. Also, I love his demon voice. Mm-hmm. Very nuanced, subtle, not overdone, but powerful.
Well, you had requested the last time we had Adam on that you wanted to see more of his dark side. So I think we established that with this story.
Now I'm just trying to think of what I want next for Adam.
But we still have to get the Teen Wolf story for him.
He has a Teen Wolf story?
In the last episode, you wanted a Teen Wolf story for Adam.
This is news to me.
Well, so what do you see in Adam's future now?
I think he'd do great in a Teen Wolf story.
Perfect. Great. We'll keep working on that.
Cool.
So I want to talk a little bit about Brittany because she, as you might expect, has a lot of other very good work that you should check out. So first of all, she has a Southern horror novel called Mississippi Blue, which is available on Amazon for Kindle and paperback. And I'm going to read a little bit about it because it's really interesting, and I am definitely going to be reading it if anyone wants to book club it with me. Set in the fictional town of Orson, Mississippi, Mississippi Blue follows the investigation of Mary Lee Hastings, the 6-year-old daughter of upstanding citizen and preacher Mark Hastings, who disappears without a trace one hot summer night in June 1969. Detective Dubois and newly appointed Detective Carolina Watterson answer the call as the town's secrets start coming out. The decades of fear, hatred, racism, and violence are revealed. All the while, the Thing, an unspeakable beast not of this world, waits and watches. You can also follow Brittany on Instagram at NoctiScriptor, so NoctiScriptor, and of course I will link that below. But definitely follow Brittany because she has yet another book coming out at the end of the year, and so you'll want to be up to date when that one hits the shelves. And anyone who didn't last time should check out Adam's band Beach Therapy, which we will link in the description below. And we also have the other half of Beach Therapy, who's also on this episode as well. So check out Beach Therapy anywhere you listen to music, definitely on Spotify. And Adam and Mike also have a film called LBI that's out. I will link all of their things in the description, so please check it out. They're very, very talented, and we love to support the people who lend their talents for this show.
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah. So Alan, I'm going to ask you to think back to the last stories episode. And I know that might be kind of difficult for you because you just forgot a whole segment about Adam. But I'm going to hope that you remember when you requested more international folklore.
I make that request daily.
So you remember.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Crystal clear.
So let's roll the tape.
Mevlevis cast out a jinn. Written by J.R. Santos. Read by Elisa Sweeney.
If he is pure, he's an angel. If he is faithless, he is a devil. If he succeeds in supporting an edifice, he is a marid. And if he is more than this, he's an ifrit. Abbreviated from Al-Yahivos Kitab al-Khayawani. It is November of 1911, and the whole of the Ottoman Empire is at war with the Kingdom of Italy. Italian soldiers keep gaining more territory, then patrol every inch of it day and night. In a village far enough from great cities to be overlooked, but close enough that one wouldn't want to be overheard, stood a humble home. Belikat was an old woman then, older than her mother had been in life. Her sons were gone, hopefully far enough not to be called for war, and her husband died to fight in a different battle, that one with the Greeks. There seemed to be no end to the folly of men. Belikat's old bones creaked like wooden boards as she kneeled on her praying rug. Prayer, day or night, was the last comfort left to her in her loneliness. And so she prayed, and she committed her thoughts and memories to Allah, and thanked him for lending her his ear. She had finished her prayers, and rose to roll her rug and ready herself for another long night with little sleep, but such plans were thwarted. A knock at her door, heavy-fisted and panicked. She froze in place, quiet, but the knocking on her door persisted. Shaking, Belikat opened her door and found her face to face with a man in a strange uniform and a 5 o'clock shadow. He had brown eyes and black hair, his skin tanned by the sun. "Help," he begs, his accent alien to her. "My friend is sick." She looks down and sees another such man laid out on a cartwheel, drenched in sweat, shaking and speaking in tongues. "I cannot help." She points out beyond the darkness around her hovel. "Go to the Mavlevis. It is their holy work you need." The man cannot comprehend her. His face tells her so. "Dervish," she announces, pointing in the distance. "Go that way." For a moment, the man's heavy breathing and his friend's mad rants were the only thing filling the night's air. But comprehension dawned on the man with brown eyes. He carted his friend away. Belikat closed her door and redoubled her prayers. Houdino, heavy-set and tanned by his time slaving under the sun, carried his compatriot on. They had been separated from their comrades for too long. Any attempt to return would result in them being declared deserters and put to death. Given their allegiance, it was no surprise the locals did not care to give them room and board, even if they had any other clothes besides their uniforms. The language barrier was enough to separate them from others. He'd come across a church. He could not tell if it was Catholic or Christian, but they were shunned by the few remaining people of the community. The priest offered a blessing, some bread and water with directions out of the more active conflict zones, or so he had hoped. Tensions were high. The Pasha was a terrible man with too much blood on his hands. What he had done to the Armenians, he easily did to his own countrymen. Between the Pasha's own forces, the Italians and the Russians, people had retreated into their communities and themselves. The old woman had given him a word he understood and directions, so he took them. Luca's fever was growing worse, and Udino could not stand the thought of having to brave the land on his own. Luca spoke again in some incomprehensible tongue, driven ever deeper into the terrors of the nightmare, before Luca became unable to move. There had been a night Udino had woken to his friend standing over him, eyes glazed over. He had feared for his life, yet remained still in terror, until Luca simply went back to sleep in his corner of the makeshift camp they had put together. As for the wheel cart, Udino had to steal it, as otherwise he would not have been able to carry his friend. He roams cobbled streets, and to do so is a miracle. He can hear the sound of the sea, and is both a blessing and a curse. How can he expect to jump on a boat back home as he was? Udino wiped the sweat off his brow with the back of his hand, unable to tell how long he walked since the last old woman pointed him in some direction. And he kept going on, with no other path made apparent to him. He's lost in a night's dream, and simply goes. He hears the echoes of music before he sees it, a small building with the lights still on, a humble temple, but crafted with care. He hesitated, but again could not choose any other thing. Only one path is present that offered hope, and that was to knock at the door. Udino had heard of the whirling dervish, but had been ignorant of them being mystics of Islam, or any of their religious beliefs. At the moment he was allowed within, He only hoped he had been rescued at last. His own father had sought refuge in the halls of a convent, after escaping a battle with his life. This was not so different, perhaps. My friend is sick. He needs a doctor. He spoke to the kindly old man with long white hair and beard, and a golden pince-nez. Atop his head sat a great hat made of camel fur. This was Sheikh Sevilin, who calmly sipped his tea and listened to Udino's tale in silence, nodding his comprehension. "Do you have a doctor?" the soldier asked. He kept on mashing his Italian with his poor knowledge of Greek and Arabic. A few dozen words at best which he mispronounced, but the sheik calmly replied in a heavily accented but competent Italian. "We are men of God, and will not turn from our door the infirm. Drink your tea, and trust us to do our best for your friend. When you are healed, you will be dressed and helped to depart by boat." Sheik Sevilin waved to Udino's cup, inviting him to drink from it. His tea was hot, too hot, but sweet. The soldier drank deeply from his cup and was served more. "Thank you," he said, his words escaping him as a rough whisper. There was a knock at the door. A brother dervish was allowed entrance into the sheik's office, whispered in the holy man's ear, and left once quietly, dismissed by Sheik Sevilin. His face was serious when facing the soldier. "Your friend is taken by some spirit. We must cast it out tonight." Udino blinked dumbly. What could he do or say? "He's weak. I don't know." "Worry not. A brother will guide you so you may bathe and rest. When all is ready, you will be called to sea." Too weak to protest, Udino bowed again to the sheik and did as he was told. Udino was pulled out of a blessed, dreamless sleep. An old man, older than the sheik himself, slowly and quietly guided Udino until they reached the wide room where the prayers would be performed. Some of the dervish sat aside to play their instruments, and Luca was laid on the center of the floor, bound. Around him was a wide circular space from which Udino, his chaperone, and the musicians stood clear from. 2 dervishes stood, wearing black mantles over their white robes, their camel hair hats discerned from the others by a blue fabric at the base. More dervish made their way into the room, receiving blessings from the first man. Then, as they passed, Luca received blessings from the second man. They eventually walked in a circle to their positions, and took off their own black mantles to reveal their white robes with long skirts. These represented the veil, which they would aim to lift from their eyes as they exalted the name of God and reached to greater heights of the Spirit. The music began, and one by one they recited their prayers in the poems of their movement's founder, kneeled on their praying mats, and began slapping the floor with both hands. Udino could only watch, baffled as these men spun in place, arms outstretched, their skirts rising to become perfect circles. Round and round they went, each stuck in their place, lost in the music, in the spinning, some with their eyes rolled back until only the whites showed. Words came in a stream, each man dissociated from himself, entering the secret realm of the spirit to touch the face of God. Udino felt dizzy, a part of himself becoming distant from his body as he watched, when a black fog exploded from Luca. It spread and turned and twisted, beaten, weakened by the spinning of the dervish. At the heart of the dark storm cloud, that billowing black mist, came fire, and at the center, a body of fire took form, almost man-like, but without distinct features. "Ifrit," whispered in awe the old man next to Udino. The dancers continued to spin, as if this was nothing to them, but the musicians nearly halted. They were ordered to continue by one of the men in the dancing ring who had blessed the dancers, and only then did Udino realize it was Sheik Sevilin himself leading the ceremony. The other fellow at the entrance of the dancing ring must have been a sheik as well. As the music resumed, the spinning intensified. The storm, which now came with its own thunder, exceeded until the Ifrit was turning also. It had no face Udino could see, but what passed for its body jerked in apparent distress, like a cornered animal. It turned left and right, only to find dervish spinning, reciting prayers and poems, all of them with their eyes unfocused. Sheik Sevilin addressed it directly then, and the answer he got was more thunder as the Ifrit swelled up. The dancers spun then, out of where they had rooted themselves, moving in circles so precise one could not help but notice, dancing, whirling, spinning, trapping the jinn in a vortex. Sheik Sevilin made his own recitations. Udino was unable to follow if he was addressing the Ifrit, the assembly, or God himself. He felt breathless and about to faint when the spirit of flame gave in, raising its hands high. It became a spiral of fire, raising itself to the roof and exploding in every direction, splitting into tendrils of flame. A dozens of shooting stars that departed into the night through the open windows. The music and the dancers went on, until at last the ceremony slowly and methodically came to a halt. All ended with prayers and the recitations of the words, which the old man had never left Udino's side, later repeated to him in Greek. God is in the east and west, and wherever you turn, there is the face of God. They took 3 days to recover from the experience. Tensions eased, and both Luca and Udino prepared to leave the dervish and find a boat that would take them home. Likely, they would have to content themselves to finding a way to Greece, and from there, find another boat. They wouldn't want to be found out, after all. Sheik, I'm not sure I understand what happened. Did we dream it? Sheik Sevelin stroked his beard and pondered before answering. Yes, all was but a dream, until the veil was lifted at last from our eyes. Now we dream again. The veil descended anew upon our weary eyes. Luca, who could not remember much, but had been told all that Udino could recall, thanked the sheik. You saved my life. I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay you. The sheik waved off Luca's concerns, blessed them, and sent them on their way. Far, far away, yet so close to the empire's heart, familiar winds returned to the heart of a certain desert. Upon that spot, a Bedouin caravan witnessed a storm like no other, for at the heart of that storm burned a bright blue flame.
We just checked a whole lot of boxes right there.
You loved the folklore.
Yes, we love the folklore. We had the jinn. We had the ifrit. We had the whirling dervish. This is my very pieced together knowledge of Middle Eastern folklore.
Sure.
And it comes almost exclusively from 2 novels.
Okay.
That being The Golem and the Genie, and its sequel, The Hidden Palace. These are novels by Helen Weckler.
Very, very cool.
Great novels. They are full of mythology. But it also takes place in not quite present day, but it's like a modern story. It takes place in like 1900s New York.
Got it.
At least the first one does. But, very ancient mythology. And it's a romance novel. It's not scary at all. But still, you get some heavy mythology in there. And just like, I don't know, I never encountered the myths of the Ifrit. And it's just really cool.
Yeah, and I will say, so this was written, of course, by our friend J.R. Santos, and he sent me a lot of information in his emails to me. So I'm going to link some sources if folks are interested in learning more. But I do want to read a little bit from his email just to add a little context, because this is, again, subject matter that we're not incredibly familiar with and we can't speak on like super eloquently. But so I'm quoting here from JR. I found no mention of the dervish performing exorcisms. They were of great relevance, however, through many generations, and theirs is a beautiful culture of worship through the arts, music, dance, and poetry. And their founder was a well-known mystic. Also, the jinn are not devils, but some of these spirits of the air and of the flame can be particular about what they feel like getting up to. The Ifrit is exorcised in this story. This practice is called al-azam, or ruqya, and exorcists are called raki. In Islam, there's a belief in angels and devils, or satanic beings. And for this, I found it more interesting to use a being that wasn't a devil, nor necessarily evil, end quote. So he took a few liberties here, so I just wanted to call that out because I think it's important.
I also want to say that there is precedent, again, quoting my 2 fiction novels as historical texts, because in that there is an Ifrit exorcism.
Oh, interesting.
Well, yeah. So a woman gets possessed by an Ifrit, and it causes all sorts of health problems for her. Not that dissimilar that you'd think from just like a Christian type possession.
Right. Well, that's actually a good point because JR sent me a little bit on that as well. Quoting again from our friend JR. Much like in the real world Vatican exorcisms in the 21st century, people who claim to be possessed are generally told to seek psychiatric help. At the same time, popular belief tells of cases such as possession, in which allegedly the jinn, in the form of a black dog, jumped out of a boy's mouth. There's also a belief that jinn fall in love with humans and may possess them. Inadvertently, the latter brings to mind the movie 3,000 Years of Longing, featuring Idris Elba and Tilda Swinton, which is a great movie, he says. So again, I know this is a subject matter that we need to learn more about, but I wanted to kind of just provide that context.
I think that's great. It's just really cool. You know, you get these. It kind of strikes the same chord for me that you'd get out of Norse mythology.
Sure.
Where you have these beings that are clearly supernatural, have all these abilities. They're very powerful, but they also have their limitations. But they're also very anthropomorphized, where they have their character flaws. They have their wants and their desires, and they give in to these cravings while also having a sense of right and wrong.
Yeah.
But localized, you know, they don't have the same moral compass as humans who, again, very limited sample set.
Yeah.
But, you know, the human ideologies are almost viewed as evil because they're so limited in scope.
Right.
An Ifrit can change into anything. You know, that's one of the defining supernatural characteristics is that they're shapeshifters.
Sure.
Because they're living flame. Flame is in constant motion. So to become too attached to worldly possessions or to the one's own aesthetics is almost like a taboo.
Right.
It's like, oh, you're getting too human. Time to go back in the desert and learn. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a desert-based mythology, which is kind of cool. You'd think, okay, so you have the desert. What do you got? You got sun and you got sand.
Right.
And what do you get from that? You get beings of pure fire that build temples of glass.
So cool.
It is cool. You know, and that's the idea, you know, the idea of the mirage in the distance is, you know, the palace of a jinn that you just are catching out of the corner of your eye, and it's going to disappear and move and change constantly. And like that's why when you get there, you can't find it because it was it was a mirage.
Right.
Or
So
it
cool.
was the palace of a jinn, and now it's just somewhere else.
Right.
Because they go with the wind.
They outsmarted you. Yeah. So I also have to just pause for a moment because not only was the story incredible, super well written, fascinating, but our narrator, Lisa Sweeney, did such an amazing job with the pronunciations here. She did a lot of work researching the pronunciations, and I just want to give her a major shout out for that because this was not an easy story for someone that isn't fluent in Arabic, and she did an incredible job, head on, 10 out of 10.
Lisa did a gosh darn slam dunk on that one.
Gosh darn slam dunk.
Big fan of Lisa.
That's high praise.
I really look forward to more from Lisa.
Yes, same. Absolutely. So, of course, please follow Lisa Sweeney on Instagram. Not only is she an incredible voice actor, but she's also an incredible actor. So follow her to see what she's up to. Follow her on Instagram at Lisa Sweeney, LISSASWEENEY. And of course, I will link her Instagram below. And if you haven't already, please check out JR's book, We Living Failures, which I will link the Amazon link in the description below. Also, he's part of an upcoming anthology, which is available for pre-order, called The Escalators from Hell, and I will also link that below.
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah. Everybody's doing cool things. Go follow them, support them. They're all great.
So far, we're 4 out of 4 between writers and narrators. Can we go 6 out of 6?
Well, I have something a little less tangible to round this episode out. If you remember back all the way to episode 43.
Oh, episode 43 was Killer Plants.
That is incorrect. Episode 43 is where we talked about
Creepy kids.
the history of exorcisms and Tourette syndrome. Because in some cases, in a lot of cases throughout history, there was exorcisms and they were a direct result of lack of medical knowledge, right? Before we had an understanding for a condition like Tourette syndrome or an understanding of folks who are neurodivergent, right? So a lot of times those people went through exorcisms before there was knowledge about what was actually happening with them. So all the way back, episode 43, we had our friend Michael Crosa on the podcast, and he has Tourette syndrome. And he talked to us about this connection, and he also told us a lot about, his experiences. And one of those things was sort of his parents taking him to a priest, not really an exorcism, but to kind of be blessed and told like in 6 months this will go away now, sort of a thing. So I thought it was important to round out, because our main episode, right, the real history that inspired The Exorcist, that's about a real person's experience with a very, very, very long exorcism. And so I thought it was important to kind of end on a note that calls back to the people, either modern day folks or folks for the last thousands of years, who have experienced these exorcisms, which may or may not have been traumatic for them as a result of some other undiagnosed issue, right? So just to kind of give us some clarity before we all sign off on this topic.
I understand.
So in honor of this, the first thing I'm going to say is that I would encourage everybody to go back and listen to episode 43, because not only does Michael shed so much light on Tourette syndrome, and it was really, really informative. It's also, for being a pretty early episode of ours, I think it stands up pretty well. And there's some good stories and history about exorcisms in there. So definitely go back and listen to that.
That's dangerous. We say don't listen to anything before episode 50.
I think we say before episode 40.
What was episode 40?
I don't know.
We just throwing out numbers here?
So I have two tapes I'm going to play for you. One is Michael, who's going to give us a little bit of context. And then the second is our friend Mike. I know, Michael and Mike. But Mike is going to read us some words that Michael wrote about what it feels like to have Tourette syndrome, just to kind of give us that perspective.
Okay, here we go.
The Privilege to Remain Silent. Written by Michael Grossa. Read by Mike Becerra.
Hello, everybody, and thanks, Abby, as always, for letting me be a part of Lunatics Radio Hour. So I wanted to provide a little bit of context as to what you're about to hear. So anyway, I developed Tourette syndrome my junior year of high school. And it was not just overnight, but actually quite literally over lunch when my arm shot out uncontrollably to the side. And shortly thereafter, within a few minutes, my whole body became subject to involuntary movements, sounds, all that stuff. This is an unusual case, as most people have tics from an early age and slowly come to a diagnosis rather than just sort of happen all of a sudden. My Tourette's was most severe in high school and college, and though it's still with me now, it's much calmer as a 33-year-old than it was back then. My sophomore year of college was particularly a monumental year, just in terms of my own identity development with Tourette's, and to make a very long story short, that's when it went from being a thing that happened to me to a part of who I am. That same year, I had attended an event which I think was called the Me Too monologues, in which people performed their own or other people's monologues about identity. I was really inspired, and I immediately went home, wrote my own monologue, and then just anonymously submitted it to be performed the next year. I didn't look at the monologue again until I attended the event my junior year. I had changed and grown so much over that year, which made the experience of seeing the monologue performed the closest I think I'll ever come to seeing myself in a time machine. I remembered the words and the feelings, but I could tell that I had already grown beyond them. So anyway, now that it's a little bit over a decade past writing this, I can remember the angst and the frustration, but thankfully it no longer feels like it represents where I am with it now, which is part of the reason that I asked for it to be read by someone else, not me. So I'm just so much more comfortable with just letting myself tick as needed and not care what anybody thinks about it. And so confronting rude comments just isn't scary anymore. So anyway, thanks for letting me ramble. I hope you'll enjoy this glimpse into my personal time machine. And thanks as always for letting me be part of the Lunatics Radio Hour.
I have Tourette syndrome, a neurological condition that causes me to make involuntary movements or noises called tics. I've had to say that so many times. Sometimes I have to say it because something awkward happens. Sometimes because I can just see people wanting to ask, but just can't. It's so relieving when you meet someone that can ask. It's unbelievable how many can't. Whenever I tell a new person about my disorder, there's always a moment of waiting for the next tic to come. waiting for my Tourette's to bubble up again and prove its existence, waiting to see what they have to say in response. Sometimes they tell me that they never would have noticed, or that it's not that bad. Some even ask me if I've ever tried to stop. Oh, how I have. You know what really gets me, though? It gets me when people think that what they see in movies and on TV is real, or even worse, funny. People tell me all the time that I should yell things just so that I can blame it on my Tourette's and get away with it. Some even have the nerve to tell me they wish they had Tourette's just so that they could do that. But I am stronger than that because I know how special stillness is. Every second of silence that I get to spend in my ever-moving body is a gift. Every single chosen word a blessing. I appreciate how wonderful it is to say shit or bitch when only that one word fits the situation. And to those people, I mean it with every single ounce of my voluntary being when I choose to say, fuck you. It is my right to cope to my Tourette's how I choose to. It is my right to not explain why I tick or how it feels if I choose not to. It is my right, but not my privilege, to remain silent.
I've got to say, that was very beautiful and powerful, I feel like.
I agree.
It brought a little tear to my eye. And I just want to also thank Michael for being so generous with us in so many ways over the years, but particularly with this topic, because I think he's providing context and a window into something that we otherwise wouldn't have. That's sort of at the expense of him having to talk about this thing, over and over again. But like thinking about that kid, right, from our episode, the last episode, who went through these crazy exorcisms and then covered this up to the extent that never wanted anyone to find out his real name. There's just a lot of shame, I think, and other things that people can carry with this kind of thing when it's miscategorized and whatever else. So I want to thank Michael for humanizing these tales that inspire horror stories and entertainment, because I think it's also important to pause and reflect on it in a deeper way. And again, Michael's the best.
Yeah, in the theme of this podcast, of the history of horror.
Yeah.
I think this was such a good way to wrap up this little exorcism series. I had no idea what we were going to do for the stories episode that was based off, a single movie, right? And then we ended up doing a bit of a little exploration into a bunch of beautiful tangents that have to do with exorcism. This was just such a cool idea to have Michael's words on here.
To me, it also feels really beautiful and full circle because you can hear the frustration in Michael's words and the power in the words that he had written a while ago. And then you can hear how sort of at peace and how, his perception and his experience has changed with this. And that's, I don't know, that's
now he's just one
really nice
darn
to
cool cat.
Yeah, he is. So thank you as always to Michael. As I've said 1,000 times, and I'll say again, Michael is incredibly talented. Please support the Podnuga Network. So Michael is standing up this amazing community-driven podcast network in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but you don't need to live there to be interested in what he's doing. I will link their website and their Instagram below. Also check out his podcast, My Part of Town, Chattanooga. He's one of those lifelong storytellers, and everything that he does is worth paying attention to.
And another Michael Crosa boon.
Okay.
If you or a loved one are interested in starting your own podcast, he's the guy to talk to. He runs seminars on how to get started, and you can come in with absolutely zero experience, expertise, equipment, absolutely nothing, and he can get you off the ground.
Yeah. Also, our friend Mike Massera, who read Michael's words, Mike, it also gave me chills a little bit when he was recording it. I thought he did a really great job. I told him sort of some of the direction that Michael had passed along, and he executed it perfectly in one take. He did two for safety, but I used the first one because it was perfect. So major thanks to Mike as well, because it brought a lot to the episode. And as we teased earlier, Mike is part of Beach Therapy. check out Beach Therapy on Spotify. Check out their film, LBI. I will link it all below. But Mike and Adam are a powerhouse duo, and very, very excited to see what's coming. I think Adam has a film coming out in a few days as well, so we'll be sure to share that on Instagram.
I did not expect our Exorcism Stories episode to be this feel-good, wholesome wrap-up that it is.
Yeah. Well, it took a nice turn. It took a nice turn for sure. I'm very, again, I don't know, maybe it's the end of the year. I don't know. I'm feeling so weepy and appreciative of everybody right now in this moment.
Tears are streaming down her face.
I thought this was a horror podcast. But anyway, I really, truly am. Thank you all so much for listening and supporting us this year. And
the only thing horrific now is the state of her mascara.
as always, thank you guys so much for being here. Stay well, stay spooky. Remember to find the sentimental and the important humanism, even in the most horrific of topics, because there's enough terror going around in real life that it's important to pause, I think, and find some good things and some real solid human connection in the midst of the state of the world. Stay well, stay spooky, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like some bonus content, consider supporting us on Patreon to access our patron-exclusive podcast, Horror Movie Club.
Also, head to lunaticsproject.com to check out our spooky merch and apparel.
You can find us at Lunatics Project on Twitter and TikTok, and The Lunatics Project on Instagram and YouTube, where you'll find our short horror films, cemetery tours, and so much more.
And please rate and review. A little feedback goes a long way to help us grow and get more content out there.
Our cover art is by Pilar Kep, and musical bumpers are by Michaela Papa and Jordan Moser.